In this episode of PHI Perspectives, we explore the notion of change and the challenges that accompany those changes. And if you're a creative person, this episode can help you stimulate your creativity and enable change in your practice. I'm Cheryl Sim, Managing Director and Curator of the PHI Foundation, and I'm your host for this PHI Perspectives episode. MIT professor William Uricchio has experienced many pushbacks when dealing with institutions in regards to the rapid change in the media landscape.
And I'll even use the word paradigm shift. Thomas Kuhn uses this word to talk about shifts in our understanding of the cosmos. When physicists believe the world works a certain way for hundreds of years, and suddenly there's a switch and everything that they knew doesn't work quite that way anymore. And I use this word because the paradigm shift that I'll talk about in a couple of senses has everything to do with our notions of professional behavior. These are people who are professionals, schooled in certain ways of thinking, top of their business, working at MIT and the Tate, and what they're up against are behaviors that are institutionalized, coming from a certain point of view. And when the world starts to shift, those professional behaviors that they're up against can be very, very difficult to fight against. They're up against existing policy assumptions. Policies are made for certain reasons. Policies, certainly about preservations, have certain assumptions. The politicians and the functionaries that drive them, that inform them, are coming from a world where certain things are taken for granted, have been taken for granted for couple of hundred years. And the conditions for that are changing. So I think paradigm shift is a really good word here. And I want to talk about this quickly in a couple of ways. First of all, there's the obvious shift from the kind of analog material to the digital. But what does that actually mean in terms of what we've been talking about today? To me, it means we're going from a world where the artifacts we save are fixed artifacts. A book is fixed. We can quibble about different variants of Hamlet or the Bible, of course. But by and large, people understand the book or the film or the recording of the Beatles' first recording of whatever as basically fixed. There's a complete version possible or thinkable. And that's completely different from the digital domain where we have endless versions, where we have updates, where user contribution is part of this scenario, where adaptations, the sort of morphing of systems over time is something that is part of the game. This is a very different entity. What's the right version? There's endless reboots and refixes and updates. There is no correct form. In cinema, you might go back to the release version, but you can't do that. I mean, you could do it with software, but why would you? That's not how it works.
The decision to pivot from one state to another is crucial, and Ted Schilowitz knows a few things about the pivoting moment. At the New Storytellers Conference, he talks about this moment as an act of cannibalism, the moment you reinvent and destroy the core of your business to come out with a renewed perspective in a time of change.
This is what Florida looked like when I moved as a little kid. It was agricultural. It was actually very, very southern, as we refer to in the worst possible way. There's wonderful things about southern, but there's some sort of bad things about southern. It was very, very racist. It was very backwards. It didn't elevate other cultures and other ideas. It was all about this one way, and this is the only way. And I got dropped into this at age 6.5. That was year one. You want to see what happened in year two? That was year two. So when I was 7.5, this crazy guy at Walt Disney decided he was going to get out of Anaheim and he was going to try and do something bigger and broader where he had more room to experiment, more room to play. And he decided to put it in this place called Florida. And I just happened to grow up there. So I grew up in a place that relished creativity, that relished risk, that understood that things are always going to change, that we're not going to live in the same place. We're going to try a lot of things, and if our audiences don't like them, we'll try something else. Turns out audiences really like this stuff, most of it, and a lot of stuff they didn't like, they would just change it. So I literally grew up in the world of the future. As a very, very young kid, it was very formative to me to understand that change was a good thing. There was a whole culture around me that just sprung up kind of out of nowhere in this very crazy place that said, this is okay. It's okay to try things. But I do want to talk about this, because this is a very important part of change dynamics. This is interesting. Do this now. So we all know this company, right? We all have some degree of love and care for this company. Anybody know what this is? Doug, you probably know what this is, right? Anybody know what that is? That's the very first digital still camera ever built. It's built by a guy named Steve in the 70s for this company called Kodak. Young engineer, they put him on task and said, can you build something for us that maybe can teach us a thing or two about technology? He built this thing. It actually worked. It's a digital sensor. Took a 0.0001 megapixel image. Fairly low res, as we say. The image was created in 23 milliseconds, fairly fast. It recorded to the storage mechanism of the day in about a minute and a half. It took a minute to write the image to that thing called a cassette tape, which some of you may remember fondly. So guess what the folks at Kodak at the top end did? They looked at this thing and they went, nice job, kid. Go back to work and leave us alone. Because no one's going to want this thing. No one's going to want a device that takes a minute to make a picture. Plus, it's gigantic and it's going to be expensive, and forget it. But good on you, right? For giving it a go. We're going to be fine selling our yellow boxes with chemicals in them. Kind of like that Blockbuster story a little bit, right? So years later, they did actually come up with a digital still camera. It was a flop. But the underlying core technology, that funny little pattern that looks like a chessboard or a checkers board, something called a Bayer pattern. It's the science behind every digital camera that is used today, almost every, with very rare exceptions. You know who invented that science? Anybody want to guess? Kodak, correct. Kodak not only invented the digital camera, they also invented the science behind the digital camera. That's digital film. That's what digital film actually looks like in the very simplest form. So Kodak owned the patent for that, but couldn't capitalize on it, couldn't figure out how to put the idea that they cultivated into practice. Remember the quote from the beginning, right? So everybody else capitalized. I was one of those people. Kodak owned that patent till 2007 when it expired. They did make billions of dollars on the patent, but they could have probably made trillions of dollars if they figured out how to act like a startup and cannibalize their business. But they were too afraid. They didn't understand how to cannibalize it, which is a hard thing to do when you've got a multi-billion-dollar business. Eventually, Kodak, a few years later, after Red was on the scene, Canon and Nikon did a lot of stuff, they declared bankruptcy. They're still around in some much smaller form.
In order to see the opportunity within the changes we are experiencing, we need to let go or embrace the impermanence of all things, as Brett Gaylor puts it in the MIT Update or Die conference.
So each time you visit a website, something like this is happening on that website. There's a little negotiation going on behind the scenes between the server and the client, and they send responses back and forth to one another. And each of those responses has a numbered code. So you, as the client, you might say like, hey, do you have that article? And then the server would say, let me check. Most of the time they would say, yes, I have that article. Here it is, which is code 200. But sometimes there's an error, and you might have seen some of these in your browser. So 403 forbidden means like maybe you don't have the password to get that content, or 408 means that it took too long for the server to get what you were asking for, and so it just gives up. Or 415 might mean it's an unsupported media type, so that server can't play those weird Doom movies that Kevin was talking about. So these are some of the types of errors that you can see. But almost all of you have seen this one, right? Who has not seen the 404 error? Right? It means page not found. And that's the most common error. It's because of that decentralized nature, right? Somebody put up a website, but it's not there anymore. It no longer exists. So the decentralized nature is kind of the web's killer feature, but it's also its curse from an archival perspective. Oh yeah, there's the GIF of, it's the weirdest 404 page on the internet. So we're probably less familiar with this error code, the 410 error, because almost no one uses it. And I really hadn't thought about this 410 very much until I read this blog post. It was about a guy named Mark Pilgrim who had committed info suicide. Mark was well known in developer circles. He wrote a lot of blogs and published books about how to write JavaScript. And one day, he just had enough. He wrote, it's time for me to find a new hobby, preferably one that doesn't involve angle brackets or computers or electricity. And so he took all of his work off the internet. And a lot of people were concerned. It was kind of this event online, people trying to track him down. And he was really prolific and well-respected person. But then they noticed that it wasn't that it was not found, it had been removed, complete with instructions to the server to give the code 410. You can see that in the developer tools over there. 410 is a unique error code that means gone. So in other words, it's intentional and permanent. No one really knows why he did it. He's still offline, you can't find him, but people sort of dug around and found this quote from him, where he says, embracing HTTP error code 410 means embracing the impermanence of all things. It's a bit of a philosophical departure from the internet.
Don Hahn, one of the major actors in the Disney Renaissance who helped re-establish a genre of cinema that is loved by all, sees opportunity in the animation industry of Montreal. In his conversation with Theodore T., he talks about how we can see opportunity in change.
Because I think the growth and the chaos of a growing industry like in Montreal right now is where the great stuff happens. It happened at Disney in the 20s and 30s. It happened at Disney in the 80s and 90s. It happened at Pixar when everybody was 20 years old in the 90s, did their most incredible work. So when you're elderly like me, you don't necessarily have the same hunger and passion. You have the passion for sure, but life is looked through a different lens, looked at through a different lens. When an industry like this, in Montreal particularly, is growing and chaotic and you're not sure what the future is and there's a lot of product going on, there's an opportunity for greatness there that is so exactly alike what we went through in the 80s and 90s at Disney. When nobody would go see a Disney film, you were a fool to work in animation because it was like, really? That's not going to last very long. Yeah. Disney tried to close down its animation division. And yet out of that, there were a bunch of really young and hungry people that came up in that process and said, no, we're going to show you there's something incredible to be done. And so it's I see an opportunity here, particularly for that kind of work to be done. You just have to believe it can be done.
That's it.
And you can't complain about budgets. We had $4 million to do the animation on Roger Rabbit. Beauty and the Beast cost $13 million. I mean, yes, it was in 1991, but still, it's like,
yeah,
that's not about the money. It's not about the money. It's about the creative choices and how you use that money and how you exercise your creative capital in certain areas of the movie.
Let's listen to Brett Gaylor, who is adapting and recreating Popcorn, a project he worked on with Mozilla for years. This is where he learned to let go of the old version of this online platform.
But then the world sort of changed again. And for us, this was the Snowden revelations in 2013, and it really changed the focus of our work at the Mozilla Foundation. And an increasing amount of our resources are now directed to helping users understand the threats to a healthy internet and supporting a larger network of like-minded organizations doing the same thing. And Popcorn was actually really challenging to make. It was this machine for stitching together parts of the internet, but what we'd find was that all these services were constantly changing. So Twitter, Flickr, YouTube, Vimeo, Google Maps, we all had included those services, and they all changed their APIs constantly and changed what they were willing to give us for free. Shit happens, foundations change their priorities, startups become empires, and in the world of software, unless you have millions of users who are paying or that someone else is willing to monetize, it's a hard go. So we had to suspend development on Popcorn Maker and had to let our community know that it would be taken offline. So we pulled a 410, and this is the notice that you get when you try to access Popcorn Maker. But the story doesn't end there. Something I've mentioned before, haven't mentioned, is that all the code for Popcorn and Popcorn Maker is free and open source software. The software was written itself by more than 50 people, most of them who are not Mozilla staff. And it's been forked more than 600 times, meaning that people have made their own versions of it. It's completely free to use and modify. No one has to ask for permission, and no one owes any royalties to us or has to pay any fees, which is what killed my first attempts with open source cinema. So my friend Tracy, the same person who introduced me to the archive team, went and copied all of our code and rehosted Popcorn Maker on the Internet Archive. And this is a screenshot of Popcorn Maker today, live. You can go there now. It's resurrected and fully functioning. And it's used as a media literacy resources in their Here's an example of it on their Trump Archives project. You can use Popcorn Maker today to remix anything on the Internet Archive's 4.7 million strong archive of moving images.
Change is part of life. Nothing is permanent, and in the words of Brett Gaylor, we have to learn to embrace impermanence of all things to create something new. There will be trial and error along the way, accompanied with moments of fear and of great joy. We only need to understand that adapting is survival and that we will be okay. Thank you for listening to PHI Perspectives. Join us for our next episode where we will revisit thinkers and creatives to understand how they see what tomorrow looks like today. To find out more, go to our website, phi-centre.com.